G'day everyone, Sophie here, coming to you live from Adelaide, live at 5. I haven't got my offsider here with me today. Catherine's had other things she needed to do, so we thought we'd mix it up. That's what we decided to do with this whole project, is mix it up a bit, have different things, don't be set in concrete about anything. So, and also, as I said before, I'm looking at getting some guests in, so that'll be next up. That's my job next week, is to line up people, and then I'll be able to tell you the dates and who we've got coming in. And let us know if you'd like to be a guest, and we'll see what we can work out. So, today being on my own, it was something I'd thought about before anyway, about the idea of doing some clay work on the podcast, like doing some live creating. But with the way life has been lately, I really literally just got the clay ready as I was just getting ready to go live. So I haven't given any thought to what I'm going to do. And I haven't done any clay work for years, it feels like. I feel like I've done little bits and pieces possibly, but certainly not since I've lived in this house, which is over a year now. I haven't done any clay work. So it's a bit of a gamble, see what happens and see if it's interesting to watch. We'll see. So I just got to think about what I'm going to do, so I just keep, every time I think about it, I just think of, it's quite often I'll do a sort of like a nature lady. I don't really know how else to explain it. So I'm not sure if it's what the ideas are of it, but all right, so that's what I'm going to do, something like that. All right, so I should mention also, I've got the flyers here. I think people would have seen, I put it up on Facebook, is about my dance class that's starting it's in a week tomorrow. It's a new class, and my regular dance class is starting next week. So pretty excited to get back into the swing of that. I love to dance, love to see the women. The new one is that it's a worship dance class that I'm starting, which is a bit of an experiment. I haven't done that before, and I'm not sort of basing it on anything I know of. It just seemed like a great idea to me. I really got when I was going to Field of Dreams Church, I really got into dancing during worship, and sort of unlocked a lot of freedom there, and I love to dance. So I sort of have this image of one day having a dance troupe that could go and be part of worship, to just shift atmospheres and have a wonderful time in God. So that's kind of the plan. But in the meantime, it's about community, it's about women, it's about well-being, health. It's just so good for you to be dancing. I really miss it when I'm on these holidays. I feel a bit topsy-turvy after the holidays. I need to get back to dancing and my routine. So, so with the dancing and this podcast and what are the other things I'm doing? I feel like there's other things. I'm writing a book. I don't know if I've talked about that with anyone, so I'll talk about that one day. I won't talk about that now, but it's sort of like a loosely formed sort of feeling of a ministry, or so, I don't know what you'd call it, but I call it Delight of Being. And that's sort of been coming along in different forms for a number of years now. And that name came out of that's some music going. That name came out of my own spiritual journey, in which I was really wrestling with how you can tell. Sometimes you sort of feel that God's urging you along a certain path, and then you sort of feel like, no, that's not God. That's something that's narrowing me and reducing me and taking away joy. But you feel like it's that you have to go that way to be properly righteous. And so I sort of coined the phrase, the delight of being, to sort of remind me that I feel like that's kind of what life's about, and that the real God, I think that's the motivation to create everything, is just the delight of being. And in a sense, that word being is sort of like God's name. Yod He Vav He is like being itself. And so delighting in that, and that's the name for Eden, is delight. So it's sort of got lots of sort of links, like interesting links. But it was just mainly to remind me that if I was getting off track and getting too religious and intense and dark and all about sacrifice and hardship, that I'd had this sort of phrase of the delight of being to remind me that if I'm not delighting in my being, something's wrong, going the wrong way. So that's the story of the delight of being. So now the other things I wanted to talk about was so the dance is starting next week, Wednesday at the Walkerville RSL. If anyone's interested, please get in touch, because it'll be a hoot. We're going to have fun. I've only got a couple of girls so far that have said definite yes, but I believe it's going to grow over time, and it's going to be wonderful. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about that's just in the news, if anybody's been watching the Daystar Saga, I don't know. People I talk to, nobody seems to know about it. But so, it's like these different things you come across online and you start watching yourself. And that's one of the ones that I was interested in, because it was sort of interesting around the kind of idea of sorry, concentration. I don't know if this is working, but anyway. Like it was coming out a lot of this stuff about this doctrine of covering and authority, which sort of came into the church that I was initially, when I was first a Christian, I belonged to a church and they started to teach this. And it's very compelling. It sort of seems really like it is connected to reality, but it gets carried away and it becomes it turns churches into cults and it becomes all about control and even obeying your pastor kind of thing, like gets really weird and quite off the track from the way Christ intended things to be with his people. And so the Daystar Saga is a church that it's a Christian television ministry that's running into a lot of trouble, and there's people talking about this clay's terrible. I couldn't find my wedging wire, so I don't feel like I've wedged it very well. So it's this funny mixture of a bit wet but a bit dry as well. Ew, so weird. Anyway, yes. So Daystar, to me, there's like been other stories too that I'd like to touch on if people are interested, but there's streams of Christianity that are very sort of functional and successful in the world's terms externally, but it's potentially at the cost of deeper truth and deeper reality. And that they sorry, no, this is hard. Okay, maybe I'll turn the music down. All right, so I wanted to just touch on the idea of shallow Christianity and the idea of, I feel like some people naturally like to go deep. Like everyone needs to go deep, and that your experience of God needs to be thorough and down to the core of your being. But it seems like some people are more naturally tuned to, like I say, a more functional layer of their personality. And it's easy to get trapped in a world where you're seeing your success on that level as being God being on your side, and that you're serving God, and maybe don't take care of some of the deeper issues that may sometimes, when you've got to do things on a deeper level with God, it can mess up your success or your functionality. But you do that even if it spoils things to the outside world. Does that make sense? So I don't know if anyone's watching this. Sorry. So she looks a bit bosomy, doesn't she? Look at that. Ooh. So, yes, I guess I've had a lot of experience of that sort of church situation where people seem to be succeeding and doing so well, but it feels like there's this sort of exposure coming of things that aren't, Jesus made a point of saying to the religious leaders of his time to don't just clean the outside of the cup and think you're clean. That's not it. Like, you got to clean the inside of the cup. That's where the real business with God happens, and that's what God sees. And that's why Jesus talks a lot of things about that if you do things for the outside world, you've got your reward already, because that's the engagement you're having with that level of who you are, and what people can see of who you are. But the really deeper, there's sort of like you've got this really deep part of you, which is like the Holy of Holies, like you're a version of the temple, and in that secret place of the Holy of Holies, that's where you do business with God, and nobody else can see that. But if you neglect that, that's, I think, when Jesus talks about that darkness inside, that if you haven't really spent the time to cultivate that space, it's easy to get trapped into a level of Christianity where you're doing things and getting confirmation from Christians, and it might all seem very Christian and fit into a paradigm of what Christianity is. But God quite often says things like, that's contemptible to him, the things that humans value. So yeah, there's these sort of interesting big level ministries coming down or being compromised or having difficulties, and Daystar is one of them. So I don't know if I covered that very well, but that was something I wanted to talk about, and I did my best under the circumstances. All right, so it's, I think that not having Catherine here to bounce off is difficult too. So just trying to find out what works and what doesn't. So thanks for coming along on the ride. If anyone's here, I don't know if anyone's here, and if nobody's here, that's all right. I've got to just pretend like you're all here with me, and you can just be like my imaginary friends, and that way I'll keep going. So anyway, here I go with all my friends coming with me, and we were going to talk about today, I can't even work out. I'm sorry if you're messaging me, if there is anyone watching and you message me, I can't see now how to see if you're commenting during this. So feel free, and I'll check in later. And should I do a naked? Like, it's so easy to do naked because it's so it feels so right in a sculpture, but I don't know, is it the right thing to do if you're a Christian? I don't know. Naked peoples. So we were going to talk about today the idea of what happens when you die. And a lot of people I talk to, they haven't really looked into near-death experiences, but that was what I was going to talk about. Is I think the most interesting information we have, apart from the Bible, of course, and other cultures. I find it always interesting. I find it interesting the fact that all cultures, all human beings have some sort of theories and stories and beliefs about a spiritual realm and what happens when you die and stuff like that. It seems like a pretty deep human response to life to kind of know and observe that dying is not the end of consciousness. So when I went through a big crisis of faith. I got married for a second time, and I married someone who was a non-believer, but also had been raised in a very rationalist, atheist kind of environment, and kind of knew a lot of the arguments about, God being wishful thinking and it's just what people want to be true and stuff like this. And I can't remember it all now. It's so long ago now, but it really took me on a very intense journey for a while of not wanting to just protect my faith and just pretend that these things didn't raise questions for me, a lot of the things that I was hearing. But so in the midst of that, when I was starting to even wonder, like, well, what is your soul, and does it exist, and is there, it was just so many questions, And I think it's important. I think it's important that your adult mind be allowed to question and look at, not just deny your questions and your doubts, but try to find answers and be real and be honest. So during that time, I came across a book in a bookshop that was called The Journey Home, and it was about this idea of near-death experiences. And it was somebody collecting people's stories about near-death experiences. And I found it really compelling. It's such a visceral thing when you hear people's stories, and, usually you can tell when they're real or when they just make-believe, and that they just had such a ring of truth about them. And it just sent me on a new understanding of that this is part of reality. So I when I get a chance, I listen to people's near-death experiences. I mean, it doesn't answer all your questions. Like, people have different experiences, and still, but they're most of the ones you hear are people coming into a state of bliss and unconditional love, and having life reviews and meeting loved ones on the other side. Poor old Catherine, when I mentioned we were going to do what happens when you die, all she could think about was your rotting corpse in the ground, and because she'd seen a rat die once and saw it rotting. So that's what happens to part of you. We know that, or you rot or you burn or something. But maybe I'll make that all flowery around it. Do you think I should? She's a bit bosomy, eh? And if I take her back out, she'll be unbalanced. I think I'll make that hair. I was watching a thing the other day about a guy who's just written a book about this, because there's so much more study and interest in it these days about near-death experiences, and people taking it very seriously. And, there was a case not that long ago of a neurosurgeon who it happened to him, and he knew, because there's so many people that say it's just a neurological response, it's just a brain chemistry thing in response to the dying process, and that's all it is. But there's plenty of evidence coming out now that that people without any brain activity and no heartbeat will be having these experiences. And so this neurosurgeon, he knew how out of it his brain was when he had his experience, and he had a very profound life-changing experience, which all of these are. They're all life-changing experiences. And I thought I'd mention too that when Jesus told a story about two guys, that it was like a parable, like a little story to talk about the one that went to that both of them died, and one went to a place of torment and one went to a place of comfort. And the one that went to a place of torment said, "Please, can I go to my brothers, because they're like me, they're just living their lives, they don't realize what's going to happen when they die. There's this place of torment." And Abraham, who he was addressing because he was a Jew, said, "Well, they've got God's word, the Torah. Let them read that," because he said, like, even if someone goes back from the dead, they won't believe it. And I just think of that when I think about these near-death experiences, because they're so real to me. When I listen to them, they're so amazing and real. But I feel like it's that same thing. Like, even those people, like, literally come back from the dead, they come back to life. So it's not like they're coming from the spirit world, but they're people who have died, who come back and tell people. But still, people don't take it very seriously, you know. So I think it's really interesting. It's easy to get washed away in the busyness of life. But really, that if that's our destination, then that's more important than anything we're doing or achieving in this world while we're here. If that's our destination, we need to find out about that and be ready for it. Because I was going to talk about the one I just watched recently. He'd just written a book about this topic, and one of the things he said was, he was talking about, that's something I saw too, is like people talk about the idea that their consciousness is so expanded when they come out of their bodies. They're free from pain, but their senses are so much bigger. They're not sort of restrained by the body's limited ability to sense. So they and he even talked about blended senses. I've never heard of that before, but I've heard of people talking about colours that they've never perceived in physical reality. But yeah, I would encourage people to go and have a look at them and listen to some of the hospice nurses and people that work with dying people, and you just get such beautiful stories of their family members from the other side coming to greet them, telling them to get ready, they're going on a journey. And it's like, it makes sense. Like, we've been so convinced by our rationalist scientific sort of world that this is all just fairy stories and it's just to make you feel comfort. But it makes sense to me that life isn't that meaningless. Like, life goes on and there's more to it than just this. Just this little period of life that we have here and now. Because so one of the amazing things that I've found with these stories is you hear stories of people that were born blind. So they've never actually perceived sight with their bodies, but they go into their spirit body. And I remember hearing this one woman actually give the account of the shock of seeing for the first time, but in her spirit body. And, it took a while to sort of understand what was happening to her. But then when she came back into her physical body, she was still blind, which is curious, but amazing, eh? Like, you just think about that. That's amazing. So it's like your spirit body is no matter what's happening to your physical body, your spirit body is whole, and it's good, and can see, even if you're blind. So I guess that's why we have to sort of tune into our spiritual selves, so we will see what's important, and not just be stuck in our limited physical vision. So there's many stories. This guy was talking about one that's published in the Lancet, which is, so like I said, serious people, who are coming from the other side of this type of debate are starting to take notice of this. Like that neurosurgeon guy, he wrote a book called something about heaven. I can't remember, but a lot of people read that. But this was a guy who was, I can't remember what his role was, but he published a paper in the Lancet, and it was particularly about, that might get me. That was other music. That he, it was about people, like he was saying, you wouldn't believe the amount of people that have the experience of dying and floating above their bodies and looking and seeing things that take place in the room, and then can report it afterwards. He said there's like so many verifiable stories, and so someone, the one in the Lancet was, one of the stories was about a guy who got brought in and he was already dead. He'd been dead he'd been in the park unconscious for half an hour. I don't know how long he'd been dead, but they were reviving him, and they, the nurse took out his dentures to intubate him or something, and as part of the reviving process, and he was then in a coma for a week, and when he came out of the coma, he was in a completely different room, of course, but when he saw that nurse that had taken out his dentures, he said, that's her, she knows where my dentures are, they're in the drawer in the bottom of that shelf with all the bottles on it. So he knew it was verifiable. And so this is, someone who's publishing this in the top scientific paper of Europe to say this is a real thing, should be taken notice of. And also the idea that 92% of people's reports of things like saying, being able to say what had happened and be able to recognize, like give information about what had happened to them when they were dead. There was 92% accuracy, and the 6% was pretty close, but just a little bit mixed up, and 2% was just the recounting of one person who were like, maybe, I don't know, they didn't say, but you think maybe they're faking it or something, I don't know. But her bosoms are still a little bit too big, I think. But I mean, big bosoms happen, don't they? What do you think? A bit too bosomy? So yeah, amazing degree of accuracy of people being able to say what happened to them whilst they were dead and what was going on around them. So I find it pretty exciting. And I think for a lot of us that have been Christian for a while, there's also, I think, a lot of fear around, you're either, righteousness and sin, and you're either going to heaven or hell, and, and there's definitely stories of people who, no, don't go in there. Come over here. Don't walk on the laptop. It's the cat. Sorry, he's trying to walk in and say hello, but he wants to walk on my laptop, and I don't know what'll happen. What was I saying? I can't remember. I need somebody here to tell me what I'm talking about. I've lost my train of thought. All right. I'll have to keep moving because there he is. There's my beauty. Hello, Goose Goose. So, yeah, I think that's just about it. I don't know. That he didn't like that. So yeah, when we die, that's right, like heaven and hell, and I think that's another topic we need to talk about, because yeah, definitely I've heard some amazing stories of people who are being sort of tormented maybe by some unpleasant kind of creatures. Yeah, like one guy, I remember he was very angry and he was just consumed in his own selfishness and anger, and he was in a situation he was an English speaker and he was in France at the time, and he died in the hospital there, and he was just angry with everyone, and he was just angry because they didn't understand him, and angry because he thought they weren't doing the right thing. And when he passed out of his body, he didn't realize, and he was still angry. And then these creatures, or that seemed to be people, came and said, oh, you have to follow us. And so he thought they were going to solve his medical problems. He didn't realize he'd passed, and that he started to follow them. And after a while, things started to get really weird as he following them, and he's thinking something's not right here. And he finds himself going deeper and deeper into something that is really disturbing and unpleasant, and they're doing horrible things to him. And he realizes something's not right, and he doesn't know what to do about it. He doesn't know. But the only thing he has this sort of understanding that he needs to cry out to God, but he's got no sort of knowledge of God in him. And I think it's him that says some version of an attempt at the Lord's Prayer from a distant memory. I think it's that. I'll have to look that up to find out for sure, but I better do a face, because that would be good before I go. I won't have to do a face. These bosoms are just too big. Maybe I'll do a bit of dress on her so she's not so rude. There you go. She looked not so rude now. So, but as soon as he kind of turned his attention to trying to get God's help, straight away there's a light up in the distance, and it gets brighter and brighter and brighter until it comes, and then he ends up being rescued by Jesus and comes back. Eventually he does get revived, comes back, and is a changed man. And that's what happens. People come back changed, realizing that they had all their priorities were wrong. This is not very good sculpture, I'm sorry. So it's a bit of an experiment to see how I can do it while I'm talking and while I'm thinking, and I don't think it's very good. I wanted to make that all sort of like flowers, and I want to make that all kind of... But, yes, so I think, we like to, as Christians, they like to sort of make it a sort of very simple heaven and hell kind of story, because it sort of helps to sort of scare people into into turning to God. But I think the reality is that reality is more complex and wonderful than we can ever imagine. And that's in the afterlife as well. I think whatever's to come, it's amazing, and it's real, and God is real, and God loves us and wants to be in connection with us, and we've got to find our way to find Him, find that. And but definitely, people who aren't religious will have this experience of coming out of their body into a state of unconditional love. So yeah, I don't really buy that it's that simple, that people who haven't kind of said certain things will end up burning in hell. It seems really crazy to me, but it's good to be reminded of, it's like that idea of the delight of being, to be reminded that God is wonderful, life is wonderful, God is life. Like if we're dreading God and we're fearful of judgment and stuff, then we've got the wrong idea, because God is wonderful, God is beautiful, and God is love. So let me just try and do a face before I finish. To finish off, and I better, Maria wanted me to put in something about the Sabbath to the pumpkin pot. So I'll do that. And I'll need to get another one out of the pumpkin pot for our topic for next week. So yeah, tell us what you think about the afterlife and if you believe in it or not. I heard one really awful story recently, someone who works as a hospice nurse, and she was telling stories. And all these ones, you see them, they put things up on YouTube and they say, when I started, I didn't really believe in the afterlife, but now I do. And but she had a story, a chilling story of some old guy who was dying alone, but he was dying with blood-curdling screams coming from his room, and that he was saying something about the children in the van. Oh, am I in picture? Something about the children in the van, and like it gave a picture of someone who'd maybe done some very evil things. And I think sometimes people do think they get away with stuff if they are detached and just concerned with themselves. And I think there is a comeuppance, if you don't do your spiritual work, then there's going to be something to pay for it, and there's going to be a process which might be very unpleasant. But God is love, and God is good, and no matter what, cry out to God, cry out to God. No matter what situation you find yourself in, cry out to God. Amen. I can't do this. I can't do the face in this amount of time. I suppose I could keep going. I suppose it wouldn't hurt if I keep going, because there's probably no one watching. And if you are watching and it's boring, you can just turn off, eh? But yeah, so it made a big impression on my faith, that sort of, I think it was like, you get to a stage in your life where your mind needs a bit of, you can believe things by faith and your convictions of what the Bible says or what you're taught or what you feel in your spirit. But sometimes your mind needs something to get hold of, especially if it's being told lots of other things that makes it doubt God's reality. But, so yeah. I'll just get the pumpkin pot down. I don't think I can really do, maybe if I've got another person here and they can talk and I can, because I just want to do a face before I go, but it's just not coming very easily. Like I said, I'm a bit out of practice. It's been a long time of not getting the clay out. And I've got this situation where I've got a heap of clay. I bought myself a ton of clay, and then I've had move and after move and busy and life, and so it's all dried out. So I've got a ton of clay and it's all dried out. So I can't bring myself to go and buy more. So then every time I think about doing some clay, I think, I've got to go and reclaim it from the old dried up clay. And it's not working. wonder what she's thinking about. Maybe she's thinking about life after death. It's an interesting topic for me at the moment because I'm looking after my mum, who's 96. And she lives in my house. And she's getting older and older. And sometimes, some days I see her asleep and I think, okay, that's what's next. Wonder what that's going to be like. So I'm learning and finding out stuff about that in reality, and I think that also, like, we've sort of lost so much touch with, like, people used to always have people, their family members would be in their homes when they died. You know, it was not a thing to go to hospital to die, was it? You'd be at home. So a lot more of these experiences would be more normal for people. Whereas we get sort of separated from these experiences, and then we also get told that they're fairy stories and that they're nonsense. And so we end up living this sort of materialistic life that is meaningless and pointless. Like, what's the point if you just go through all this hardship and then you just die and rot into the soil? Clearly there's part of us that is non-physical. We all experience that, no matter what we believe about it. We all experience a lot of who we are is not physical. I think I'm going to have to just go. I can't do this before I go. Oh. It's a bit small and fiddly too, as I said, a bit out of practice. Alright, let me get the pumpkin cup top down. Alright, let me know if you like seeing me doing sculpture, and I can maybe tie that in sometimes. What is she thinking, do you think? That's as good as I can do in the time and with the split concentration. So I hope that was interesting, but let's see, let's have a look at the pumpkin pot. Oh, Satanism! That's a jolly topic, isn't it? It's something it comes up a lot if you're looking at conspiracy theories and about people that are possessed by the desire for absolute power and control and evil. So that should be interesting. I'll have a little chat about Satanism and what I know about it, and I've been watching some videos with Anton LaVey recently, just revisiting that, because I got very affected by I've got to write a thing on for Maria. Maria asked me to put in something about the Sabbath. I wasn't sure. I'll have to check with her. I wasn't sure if she meant just the Sabbath generally or the Sabbath in terms of how many days Jesus was dead before he rose. Sabbath. I think I've spelled that wrong, but anyway, I'll put that in. And you can tell me, Maria, if I've got that wrong. Yes, I should talk about this. There's a very interesting story that I came across about how Anton LaVey died, which is not the official story from Satanism, from the Satanist church. They hold that he just died in hospital. That's their story, and that it wasn't on Halloween. But this guy from this church and his wife, who looked completely credible to me, have this whole story about how this woman came to their church and she looked like she was in a domestic violence situation or something. She looked a bit frightened and knocked around. And she wanted to become a Christian. And so they started helping her, but it turned out that she was trying to escape from her father, Anton LaVey, the head of the Satanist Church of America. And there ensued this huge, big spiritual battle for her soul, because they were due to sacrifice her to Satan on Halloween Eve, and they were desperate to get her back. And Anton LaVey would astral travel to, and even take possession of her himself, this girl, who had been conceived in a satanic ritual. And huge spiritual battle to get her free from it. And so I find it really compelling, because it's like sometimes we don't realize the spiritual darkness that can be invested in things, and it's not just as simple as just saying a prayer to get free or something. Sometimes it takes a bit of a process. But so the end result of that was that when Anton LaVey, he was somewhere at being guarded by his followers, and he was astral traveling, so he'd gone out of his body and was doing dastardly things to get her back. And that they were so desperate at some point they didn't know what else to do, because he was going to win and get her. So they prayed that God would cut his silver cord or golden cord, I can't remember, silver cord. So this concept of the cord that holds you to your body, and if it's cut, then you die. You lose contact with your body. And that they prayed for that, and that's what happened. He died because he couldn't get back to his body. Crazy, huh? So that had a big impact on me, that story, because I've got some pretty weird things in my background with cults and stuff that I got involved in, with my mum's got involved in when I was a kid. And it's taken a bit of time to untangle some of those things in my life. And it sort of made sense to me that people who haven't had those things in their life don't necessarily understand that it's not just a simple thing to get free from them. All right. Sorry, my sculpture didn't turn out very good. I'll work on it, and then I'll show you next week, in case anyone's interested. I don't know if anyone watched. Anyway, thank you, my imaginary friends. So I hope there's some real friends there watching. Oh, and I got my I'm very blessed to have a what's it called? Frangipani tree at this house. So I thought I'd grace my hair with some beautiful frangipanis, because they smell so good and they're so pretty. All right, I'm going to stop streaming now.